Welcome to another episode of Stories of Awakening podcast. Today I am with KJ. She is an astrologer who specializes in location business and lifestyle optimization. And she is here to tell us her story and what she does now for a living. Hi, KJ, how are you?
Hi, Valentina. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So tell us your story, whatever you feel is important for us to know.
Wow. Well, I guess this goes back probably 10 to 15 years ago. And I always knew I was a little bit different. So for preface, I grew up in rural North Carolina and in a town of about 600 people. So I felt a little alien-like in some ways, just
Mhm.
because I was interested in things that my family and people that I was around really didn't even understand. I loved theater. I loved magic. The second I could go into a thrift shop and run to the psychology and occult book section as a child, which is really weird, just drawn to things that helped explain the world because I was like exhaustively curious about everything and everyone. And I think that brings me to kind of where I'm at now, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I felt the world in pictures and patterns and colors. Everything was psychedelic and effervescent. And then later, when I was actually in astrology school, I was told that I have synesthesia, and I didn't know what that was until I was in my 20s, which is kind of crazy to have something. And then all of a sudden, you discover that the way that you've been experiencing the world, it's different from the way that everyone else experiences it. It's shattering in a way.
Mhm.
And if you don't know what synesthesia is, it's when neurons in your brain are stimulated by external output, say like you read a word, your neurons get crossed. And so instead of just reading the word and understanding the word, you might smell it, or you might have a color that comes into your mind's eye, or some type of sensation or flavor in your mouth. And I've had this all of my life, and I thought that it was completely normal or just like this funny little fluke. And it turns out that not everyone has that. In fact, most people don't. And it's something that's on the neurodivergent spectrum, which I already knew I had ADHD. That was a diagnosis. So I was like, okay, my brain's a little fruity, like it works different than most people. I get bored in school because I understand things too quickly. Other things just don't make sense no matter how many ways you put it in front of me. I memorize words based on what color they looked like instead of
Wow.
actually how words are pronounced, which really confused my mother, who's a teacher. Um, but all of that was just like this extra thing that I never really paid attention to. And I'm sure you've talked to some people on your show before who can probably attest to if you have gifts or if you have intuitive abilities, as life goes on and life gets harder, they kind of become numb
Mhm.
or out of the picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Because
Also
life,
because, yeah,
yeah, society doesn't care
society,
about those things.
exactly. I was about to say society doesn't push you to develop them actually. So yeah, we we stop using
Yeah.
them.
And it's true. I feel like so all of that to say, I was born really colorful, and then I went through an extremely traumatic experience when I was 15. And I can't even talk about all of the details, but it was like nothing that anyone else I knew had ever experienced. Um, I got removed from my school that I was going to. There was a series of just like bad events. Like if you can think about it, it probably happened within a year time span.
Mhm.
And I it changed my life fundamentally. And I suffered a lot of PTSD. did a lot of therapy. And after that year, I was like, I'm determined to go to college, leave this town, and just start over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my health started to decline. And I was trying to just move forward and take action. And when your health is slowly slipping away and you don't understand it, it's pretty bizarre. And so I was like 17 at this point. I had just gone through like the craziest year of my life. I was so ready to leave. And I actually did get accepted into the school that I really wanted to go to, which was SCAD in Savannah, Georgia, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And I'd been wanting to go there since I was like 13 or 14. It was like a dream college. Couldn't believe that I got in after everything that I'd been through. And I moved into college wearing a heart monitor because my heart was skipping beats and having these really intense contractions and flutters. Like sometimes I thought I was having a heart attack. And I was a 17-year-old girl who was of normal weight, had never had heart issues. And this was just so bizarre. And so I was wearing this heart monitor that would sometimes in the middle of class just like sound off with like dial-up internet noise, like it was yeah, you can imagine. It's like embarrassing and also annoying. I had these like stickers on my chest all day, and it came back as inconclusive as most medical tests do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then things started to progressively get a lot worse. I had been dealing with some weird symptoms throughout my life, but nothing that was like alarming. I had dry eyes, like severe dry eyes. I had taken like prescription dry eye medicine to try to fix it. And I was like, oh, it's just allergies, or it's just because I have to have contacts, and little things like that that you can just write off. And a lot of medical doctors love to write it off, especially when a woman comes through with health issues. They say, are you sure you're not just anxious? Are you drinking enough water?
Mm-hmm.
All of
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. And so it's easy to kind of gaslight yourself and say, I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
And things slowly started to compound. And I was all of a sudden at school, my hand was swelling and my joints were swelling. My hands looked like I was like 50 years, 50, 60, 70 with like severe arthritis. My joints were swelling. And so I was at art school and I was in a drawing class and I couldn't even finish my final because I couldn't move my freaking fingers.
Oh my
And
goodness.
my roommate, yeah, it was crazy. My roommate was kind enough she was a really good artist. And I was like, my hand was so swollen. She she helped me do my final project because I like couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
it. And I was sleeping about 14 to 15 hours a day all of a sudden. And this was over the course of like 2 to 3 months that this started to like really escalate. I was having rashes, all of this stuff. And I was calling my parents all the time, and they were trying to read books and figure out what was going on. And they were playing Dr. Google. And this was before Uber was a thing, and I didn't have a car. And I was also
Mm-hmm.
17. And so going to the doctor was a thing because I had to call taxi companies or get friends to take me to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting all these like chest x-rays and other stuff. And I would have to get waivers faxed to my mom for her to sign to let me go to the doctor by myself because I was 17. It's kind of nuts looking back. And then finally things got worse. And then the semester was over and I went home and I was so sick. I remember I had so much joint pain in my hips. My hips were so sore. I could barely sit in the car for the 5-hour drive. And I went home and I knew I wasn't coming back. And it was really sad about it, but I was like, I know I'm not coming back. And I know I'm not supposed to pursue art and acting and film. Like, I'm not supposed to do this because there's something else I'm supposed to do. And I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And I took a semester off and enrolled in community college. And I was back in that town that I freaking hated,
Mm-hmm.
living with my parents. And it felt I felt so defeated. And I was trying to heal and figure out what was wrong with me because I went to one doctor and he did some blood work and said, oh, you have progressed Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So in the South, tick-borne illness is a really big thing, but it usually comes and lasts for like a week at a time. You get sick, you have a fever, because ticks are everywhere. And I lived in the country, so like getting bit by a tick, that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when it progresses, like let's say you get sick as a kid or you get sick early on and you don't take antibiotics, it can progress and it can really wreak havoc on your system. Like I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably aware of like, long-term Lyme disease. That's another one of those tick-borne illnesses. And so they put me on this intense round of antibiotics that was almost like chemotherapy. I was so sick, I couldn't eat. And I just kept getting sicker and sicker. He was like, if you don't take these, you're going to die in 3 weeks. So my parents were like, oh my God, like take the medicine. Like of course, if you're 17, 18 years old and they tell you you're going to die in 3 weeks, you start freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And then
of course,
I was just getting progressively so much worse. And I had another doctor appointment that it got pushed out so much further because like in the US, it's really hard to get doctor appointments with specialists when you need them. Our healthcare system is incredibly broken. It can take months to get an appointment when you need it. And so I had this appointment on the books since October and it was January. And I was like, I'm going to die soon. I was like, I'm sleeping 16 hours a day. Like I'm so swollen with lymph fluid. I looked so heavy and puffy and my joints were swollen. It's covered in acne and rashes that I'd never had before. And I had the butterfly rash on my cheeks. And so one thing that we kept going back to was, do I have lupus? And we kept tossing around all these things. And I went to this new doctor and she said, he read your blood test wrong. You don't have Rocky Mountain spotted fever. You have an antibody for it because you've lived in the country your whole life. You have elevated ANA, which is an autoimmune marker.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, it's good that you don't have spotted fever, but the bad news is you have a chronic autoimmune disease that you're going to have for the rest of your life. Mm. And ironically, I was so relieved. If you've ever been through a chronic illness journey, just to get a diagnosis that feels correct is the most relieving thing in the world, even if it is the worst diagnosis that you could possibly have.
At least you know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you can then figure out how to work with it. Mm-hmm. And then she put me on this pharmaceutical and she was like, you're going to take this medicine until you die. And you have to go get regular eye checkups because it can create black holes in your retina and it can just come on suddenly. And if you take it more than 10 years, your increase of blindness is really high. I was like, fucking fantastic. This is great.
Oh my God.
And at the time, like there were so many things going through my head is like, one thing, it's so funny too. I was like, is anyone going to ever love me because of this? Like, there's a lot of things that go through your head. Like, am I going to live to see 40? Mm-hmm. But is anyone going to love me? Am I going to be able to have a normal job? Am I going to be able to travel and see things? Because the person I am now is like a completely different person, physically, mentally, and emotionally than I was then. I was so, so sick. And I spent the next semester, I went to community college. I spent the next semester going to half-price books and thrift stores and reading every single book I possibly could to give me answers. I got books on herbalism. I got books on nutrition. I got books on vegan diets and gluten-free diets. I learned how to juice. And then I also got books on chakras and metaphysics and astrology. My first astrology books were Vedic astrology books because I was really into Ayurveda. And there's a big connection of like the elements. And I was like, this is making a lot of sense. Like one of the major elements that I'm really dealing with is like dryness and a balance of like healthy fluid and unhealthy fluid. And it all made so much sense to me. And I was like, why aren't there doctors working with all of these natural things? And this is when it started to click. I was like, I'm supposed to learn about holistic health. I'm supposed to learn how to heal people. And in my mind, it was still very physical. I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. I want to be like a naturopath. I want to go and like help people learn all the different ways that you can heal when the system has completely failed you. And after that semester, I took medicine. I started to get a little bit better. I could actually like do things. And I went to university. I started going to East Carolina University. And culturally, it probably wasn't the best fit. It's a pretty conservative university, but they had a good health program, and I really wanted to learn nutrition and health. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn to be like a dietitian or a nutritionist. I like nutrition. Food is medicine. That was my thing. I was like, food is medicine. It's making me feel so much better. I'm not eating gluten. I'm green juicing. I'm getting my vegetables from farmers markets. I'm teaching my family how to cook things that we've never even thought about, because I grew up in a family that, grew some of our own vegetables, and the rest was like canned, very like easy, poor Midwestern kind of cooking. And we didn't really know like grass-fed meat is good for you, and limiting the amount of like refined grains is good for you. So I was learning all these things and starting to feel a lot better. But the program itself that I was in was heartbreaking. I felt so disillusioned because my professors would sit there and talk about caloric deficit as the only way to lose weight and create health, while they were eating Taco Bell and drinking Mountain Dew in lecture. And I was just so perplexed. I was like, how can you be a nutrition professor, like head of the department, and you're drinking Diet Mountain Dew, which has petroleum derived yellow food dye. It has aspartame, like all of these chemicals and things that are banned in other countries. Like they probably don't even have Mountain Dew in Italy, do they?
No, I don't even know what it is. But
yeah, it's a soda. It is a bright yellow lemon lime soda.
Yeah.
And Diet Mountain Dew is probably even worse because it has like fake sugar chemicals. So watching these people who are supposed to be helping and healing people drinking and eating these kinds of things, I remember the one day that my life changed, I raised my hand and there was something in our textbook about phytochemicals. And I read, it was one paragraph, and it was like, all fruits and vegetables and all foods have phytochemicals, but there's not enough research on them, so we're not going to teach them. And I felt like my heart broke into a million pieces that day, because I was like, this is what I signed up for. I wanted to know like, what healing properties does a tomato have different from a grape, and what are those small phytochemicals that make a difference in the healing process, depending on what type of things you might be dealing with. And so that affirmed for me that was not going to be it. And if I ever wanted to actually help and heal people, it was not going to be through this conventional means. And at the same time, I was still sick. Like I was better. I could like walk. If that's a measure, like I could walk and I could keep food down, but I was in college and I couldn't party like my friends. Like I couldn't do the thing, because I would go to a party and I would have like one alcoholic drink and I would break out in hives and I'd have to go home. Like something was just not right. I was not normal, and I was kind of isolated in some ways and trying to figure this out. And in private on my own, I started to really study spirituality really heavy, like as a component to psychology. And while I'm having like this, I'm trying to come out of this dark night of the soul, I'm discovering that I have a lot of trauma from that period of my life that has just completely gone unhealed, because I was focusing on the physical part. And you cannot heal your body if you have a ton of unhealed mental and emotional trauma, because your body is storing that, and your nervous system is fried and you're on high alert, and there's just no possible way that you can heal one without the other, because they are so intertwined. And that was when I was like, okay, I really need to start focusing on this, and like letting these painful things sort of come up to be processed. And so I can move on and let them release from my body. And there was a lot of ways that I was trying so hard to fit into a mold. I was trying to fit into the mold of this program to be like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. This is a way to help and heal people. I was trying to fit into a mold of being a Southern girl at college in a sorority and dating men and like doing what you're supposed to do, like having the boyfriend that looks good on paper and getting the good grades and, being like president of your sorority and all these things. And I had blonde hair extensions and all these things. I was like putting up such a projection of like what I thought I needed to do to be okay, to be good, to be successful, to be healthy. And I was noticing that as I did that, I was like dying inside there. And I just kept getting sicker. And I was like fighting up against it, doing all these things, throwing spaghetti against the wall and trying to heal. And at the end of the day, I was hiding from myself because myself felt dangerous. Because the last time I was myself, my life fell apart. And that's the lesson is when I started to become me, to become who I was when I was younger, before the world damaged me or broke me, that was the spiritual awakening. I had this one moment where I was like, I don't want any of this. I don't want any of this life that I've made or created. And there is so much more out there. And when I started to learn about my own astrology, when I was studying this stuff and learning about the archetypes and psychology, I felt like my internal server came on board for the first time in a very long time. Like I was being reflected back to myself in a way, like this is who I am. Every piece of this journey is part of what was meant to happen to make sense in my story and to help me develop who I'm supposed to become. But I've been covering up so much of who I am authentically. And that is what is preventing the healing process. And it's what's preventing the healing process in so many of us is because we're trying so hard to become something that we're not meant to be.
Yeah.
And ignoring all the pain and the trauma that needs to come up and be healed that we need to confront and acknowledge so we can move on from it and free ourselves. Because essentially, I think that a spiritual awakening isn't becoming less human and more spiritual. It is discovering who you are and who you're really designed to be. And then that process of killing off and letting that fake version of you die, letting that shell go so you can become the person that you're born to be. It's essentially becoming more authentically human than less human. Like the more human you become, the more real and true you become, the more spiritual you are, the more connected you are to your higher self and your purpose and the thing that you're meant to do and be and serve here on earth to help other people. You're going back to your core self that is unique to you and it looks completely different from everyone else. That is, in my opinion, what the spiritual awakening is. You're coming back to yourself and you're letting go of all the tethers and ties of all the trauma and the expectations and the projections of society that really just don't fit. You're cleaning out all the noise and you're coming back to who you are.
Wow, that's an amazing definition. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And you really went through a lot, and I'm so happy to see you so well now and thriving in life. And this has to, this gives people hope. That's why in my life, I read so many biographies of so many people, because even when people go through hell, there is always hope. And if you don't give up, you will find your way out. And it's actually what you go through, most likely is part of your mission, right? And yeah. And whatever you overcome, it becomes what you can help other with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know, the good part about all of this is that when I decided that I wanted to just really explore myself and come back to those roots, I came out of the closet twice. First, I came out of the gay closet and I met my partner, and we've been together almost 6 years. And then I came out of the broom closet as a witch. And I think that was even harder than coming out of the first one, despite the connotation of being in the South. And I picked up my life. I lived in Texas at the time, and I picked up my life and I moved to Portland, where I'd always wanted to go to study becoming a naturopath and becoming and learning astrology, because they had both of the schools. And I ended up going there because my partner's family lived there. It was just like a weird synchronicity of like alignment that I didn't plan. And I was kind of suffocating in my job in Texas. Another one of those things where I was like trying to fit a mold again. And it just didn't work. And so when I just decided I'm just going to be super unapologetic, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do and give myself a permission slip, which my natal chart really helped me do by looking and seeing like, you know, I'm a Cancer moon. I'm really soft and tender. I'm meant to be an artist. No wonder I can cook really good. I'm meant to help and heal people and nurture people. And I'm a sensitive artist. And then like, you know, I'm a Sagittarius rising. I'm meant to travel and experience things and teach people about those experiences. And I'm a Gemini. I'm infinitely curious. All of these things that helped me kind of anchor into that when I was going through a really tough transition led to me going to Portland, feeling like I could finally exhale for the first time in my life. And then after a year and a half of being there, I went to a rheumatologist to get like my regular blood work done to see how the lupus was going. And she was like, holy shit, never in my career have I seen someone's ANA and all the other blood work go negative. Like on paper, you don't have lupus. It's almost like you never had it. She's like, that doesn't happen. Like, this is kind of like magic. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, we need to retest this. Let's just test it again. I didn't have it. It's almost like it went away.
Amazing.
And when you get a lupus diagnosis or any type of chronic illness, they tell you that you're going to have it forever. And she was like, it looks like it's gone. She's like, you know, you need to take care of yourself. Like, don't look at it as like a free pass. But I was like, can I stop taking this medicine that might make me go blind? And she was like, I'm totally fine with you, you know, trying to get off of it and see how you feel. And I've been off of it since early 2018 now, so 5 years. And I still feel really good and I take care of myself. And I think a huge part of it wasn't just the nutrition and the physical stuff, because that wasn't working at an earlier point, but it was the trauma healing and the becoming authentic. That was the big piece. Becoming true, becoming authentic, connecting with the inner child and the higher self, and bringing them all together and just being real and embracing, like, I'm not supposed to have a normal job. I'm probably going to do weird things like become a spiritual teacher. And then I ended up becoming an astrologer and teaching people how to use their chart to find themselves and their purpose and their ideal business and where they should live in order to become more true to themselves, how to optimize your life and make your life easier with timing of the seasons, because we have this cool tool that helps us do that. That is true to ourselves. And it really just helped me so much, like giving me something to anchor to come back to anytime I feel like there's a lot of noise out there. And I think a lot of empaths and sensitive people can really use that, come back to. And I just want to be a testament that, you know, if you ever are told that you're broken and can't be fixed, that it's completely a lie, because you can fix anything. You can heal your body, you can heal your mind, and you can heal your soul. And there's always a more authentic version of yourself that you can go back to whenever you feel lost.
I totally agree. Yeah, thanks so much for saying that. And I really liked what you said now about integration of different parts of yourself, the inner child, the higher self, and becoming more and more authentic. We are really
I
here
heard
to
a theory
be,
once.
yeah.
I heard a theory once that maybe they're the same person, the higher self and the inner child, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's possible. And yeah, and thanks for highlighting also the importance of healing on emotional and mental level, because I really truly believe that you can exercise as much as you want. You can take all the juices in the world, which they work, and I think is good. Know about nutrition too. But until you focus specifically on your mental, emotional healing, you will never be, I think, fully healed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I also really liked what you said about psychology and astrology, because I really think they go well together. And you were
Oh,
studying
yeah.
both at some point, you said. And
Yeah.
yeah, I give mini astrology readings. I'm not as experienced as you are, but I know some people that actually, thanks to that reading, they went to therapy and they were able to discuss about some of the things that came up during in
Yeah,
their chart. So yeah, I hope
totally.
soon, yeah, these things will merge more and more.
I think so.
And
I was even
yeah.
trying to find, like, in my area for myself, a therapist who is at least astrology literate, because it is such a huge part of my life as an astrologer to decode things in patterns. And so, if I'm like, oh, I'm going through this transit right now, and like I'm uncovering this pattern, it would just make so much more sense to have a therapist who at least gets
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I can be the astrologer, but I would love the therapist to at least be like literate. And I feel like we need more of that. So, like, if you're a therapist, learn some astrology, because I think it can really help a huge demographic of people that you're
Mm-hmm.
probably already serving in a better way. Because I was
Yeah.
just talking to a therapist about this the other day, and she was interviewing me for her podcast. And I was like, it's kind of like energetic surgery, the astrology part. Like, you get to go
Mm-hmm.
in and just figure out what the pattern is and the issue and pinpoint it. So you don't have to spend like 5+ sessions getting to the root of the problem. Then you can just figure out what it is and be like, okay, now we're going to jump into therapy and start working on this. So we don't
Absolutely.
have to waste the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And in fact, I went to therapy for a couple of years myself, and I cannot say it was useless. It was useful to understand my past and my family and everything. But when I did let's say, I had the most healing and I moved forward faster, was when I started to um, study and into spirituality. And I think you heal much faster. And one of the tools was astrology. The first astrology reading that I had really changed my life and really um, put me on my. It confirmed what I was feeling inside that I was meant to do here. And you're, had an amazing reading with you, and all of the things that you said are happening is actually crazy. So
That's so cool.
I thanks so much for that. You're really super gifted, and I will definitely get another reading from you at some point.
Thanks.
And there are so many people that might listen that don't believe in astrology. And when I talk about astrology with the people around me, they really don't believe it's a thing. But I think that if you don't believe in it, it's just because you didn't study it or because you didn't
Yeah,
have a reading.
yeah.
is is
There's a
not
difference
knowing
in
about
a
it.
lack of belief and a lack of understanding. That's what I always think is just give it
Exactly.
a chance to understand it with an open mind, and then you'll
Yeah.
be probably mind blown. But I do think there's people, and I don't like this at all, but I think there's there are people out there who maybe don't really understand astrology enough to be giving readings,
Mm-hmm.
that some people might get a reading from someone and they're like, oh, well, I had a bad experience, so I don't believe in astrology. It's like,
Mm.
in this
And
case,
also true.
shoot the messenger, not the message, you know?
Yeah.
Give it
No,
a chance
yeah,
and
that's
like keep
true.
studying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, you need to do your own research to find people that, they're really talented. KJ, I suggest it to everyone. When everyone needs a reading, I always send them your way.
Thank
Um,
you, love. I'm so glad that
yeah.
you're learning and practicing too and sharing your wisdom and gifts, because I think, there needs to be, in my dream, I would love for astrology to be a universal language that people at least know the basics of. Like they know their chart, they know their
Mm-hmm.
partners, and you use it as a way to understand one another, and you can track the moon. Like if that's the basics of it, then you don't need to know all the intricate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was just taught like an elementary level to children, man, the world would be so much different.
I so agree with this. So, would you mind describing astrology or try to explain what it is or what it can be useful for? What do you do exactly with it? And also, I think it's important to explain what it is, because there are many people that maybe have a reading as well. Maybe they are interested in these esoteric studies, but they might have not done enough research or work on themselves, and they might use astrology, in the wrong way, in a sense that they might say, oh, I hate Scorpio, or I hate Virgo people. It's a kind of different, it's a spiritual racism. So
It is
also
spiritual racism. Oh my God. That's so
uh,
funny.
yeah, so also
Yeah.
I think it can be very useful to understand people and why we're all different and why we behave in different ways, and also understand that we are all whole, and there is the 12 signs in all of us, and there is no better or
Yeah.
worse, it's just different. So this is, I think,
Yeah.
very important to say to the people that want to know more about it.
Well, in short, I could probably give a 3-day workshop lecture on what is astrology, but I will keep it very concise. Um, but first, before we do that, I want you to just erase what you know or what you think you know about astrology from your brain. Erase CoStar, erase the sanctuary horoscopes that you send your friend on Instagram, delete the idea of the sun sign. And, if you think, oh, I really love Leos, but I hate Geminis, like delete it. Let it go, like surrender it, put it on an imaginary boat and watch it drift off to sea just for 3 minutes so I can tell you this. Think of astrology as a big wheel, like a big wheel of time that encompasses everything, every single thing on earth that we can think of, the good, the bad, everything in between. A massive, massive wheel that is comprised of little moments, thousands and thousands, millions of little, billions of little moments. And we can look at this in a very technical sense if we look at the chart wheel, or we look at something called the ephemeris, which is a big fat book of planets and what degree that they're at. But astrology is very mechanical because the planets are always moving at a specific pace. It never changes. And it's always moving in a certain cadence. And it repeats this pattern over and over again for the eternity of time. Essentially, astrology is a time tracker. It is the oldest timekeeping tool. Pyramids were built for the purpose of tracking the planets, for timekeeping and what people should be doing at those different times. They tracked Venus, they tracked the sun for planting and harvesting. They used it to optimize their life, and we're missing out on that because we have digital clocks now and we don't even have proper circadian rhythms. But this is the oldest natural time. So think about that first. When it comes to your life, you can use the moon cycles for setting goals and then achieving those goals and celebrating those goals. Like there's so many ways to use it as a time tracking tool. The psychological piece comes in, I think of it like this. In that big circle that we were thinking of that holds every single quality of moment of time, when someone is born, you are the essence of that moment of time. And if you think about it like this, some of those moments of time are really challenging. They're really, really tough moments in time. Like we can have a day and be like, God, there is something going on in the stars today. And it just feels like really wacky and like not great. And there's really tough stuff happening. But there's a baby born during that time, and they are in essence of that moment in time. And they might have more challenges in their life, or, they might turn out to, do some things that are not the greatest. Then we could have a day that feels so light and fun, and you're like, wow, like everything's going so well today, and there's a baby born that's their birth chart is that moment in time that you're feeling, and maybe they're the next Mother Teresa, like they're like someone who is a prophet of love and kindness and community and beauty. And so I want you to think of yourself as just a blip and moment of time, and the person next to you as a moment of time. And your birth chart explains the quality of that. And you are that version of the universe. You are the expression of that little tiny piece of the universe that is that big fat circle that holds the entirety of everything to ever exist. And if we start looking at ourselves as a very unique blip in time, and the other people next to us as a unique blip in time, then we can understand that we're all different, and we're all coming from different places, and we're meant to have separate experiences, separate qualities, traits, gifts, challenges, and we're just the universe experiencing itself through that particular moment of time. And I've never explained it in that way, and I hope it makes sense, because I think that's kind of a far out way of explaining it, but I'm hoping that it will land for the people that it's meant to land for.
I got it, and it's a beautiful explanation. I never heard it like that before. So thanks
Cool.
so
I hope
much.
that it lands.
Wow. Okay. I have another question, if it's okay for you.
Yeah.
So since I have you here, I'm gonna use you.
Yeah.
Since I think we are entering a very important time in our history, would you like to share a little bit about what is going to happen in the future based on what astrology is saying, for example, that Pluto moved out Capricorn, entering in Aquarius, especially that,
Yeah.
and anything else maybe that you feel like sharing?
Well, I think this is a call that we need to be really conscious of what we have created as far as technology, so that we're using it to its full benefit and not in a lazy way or a way that harms humanity. Because the lesson of Pluto in Aquarius is really and this is going to be a transit that lasts the next 20 years. The next 20 years are really going to be about building community and how resilient we are because of our community and not just individuals, and getting really clear on what our role is in the collective. What are you really here to do, and what you're meant to do is going to be unique from your neighbor or your partner, but getting really clear and solid on that and becoming the best version of that role that you can be in order to serve your greater community and world. And then the other piece of this is the technology piece. And we're kind of at a point where technology has reached a peak, you could say. And we need to be good stewards of this and be responsible and think about, how can we use things like AI in a really good way to help everyone and help ourselves and create a better place to live than just using it to support some of the same outdated systems that keep exploiting people and harming the planet. And I think we're getting a lot of signs that we need to take better care of the planet. I think that's one of our big lessons of the next 2 years, especially with Saturn and Pisces, is we live like we're called the water planet for a reason. And I think we're going to learn some tough lessons when it comes to water.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take that like very literally as like, okay, we've already been dealing with some of that in the US, and there's been some chemical spills recently in the US that we need to be really cognizant of clean water, where we're getting our water, and how we are preventing things that contaminate our water, because water is life in
Mm-hmm.
such a basic way. It's what makes up our bodies, it's what makes up our planet. And one of our lessons is going to be about cleanliness and taking care and having more reverence for ourselves and our planet, so that we don't get sick, so that we don't have like more. And who knows, I'm not going to get into like where the origins of stuff happened, but so we don't have more plagues, so we don't have
Mm-hmm.
more illnesses that create chaos in the world. So I would say our big lessons are, how can we be better stewards of the technology that we have
Mm-hmm.
and focus on ways that make a bigger impact beyond ourselves, and also banding together against false prophets, maybe they're politicians that
Mm-hmm.
really aren't in our best interest, instead of the common people dividing.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying like, oh, this is a Republican or a Democrat issue, it's like, actually, this is a common majority versus corrupt billionaire issue. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's more of us than there are of them, and we should come together to try to fix some of these things,
Mm-hmm.
instead of letting like these really petty politics and stuff get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be a big lesson for most people, is like, how can globalization in a way actually be a good thing, as far as like, different countries sort of banding together to say like, we don't stand for corruption, and we want better ways to live. We want better lifestyles for the majority. And a lot of the wealth disparity that occurred during 2020 is
Mm-hmm.
probably going to be like turned on its head, and people are going to reach a breaking point. So I think coming together, setting differences aside to realize that we all want the same thing, and figuring out what tools we can use technology wise to support that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
astrology is an excellent technology tool
Mm-hmm.
to help us. And there's so many governments that have been using the patterns and mechanics of astrology for a really long time, but it's been given such a negative connotation, with like traditional religious
Mm-hmm.
um, upbringings. And, I think pop astrology has really done it a disservice. We think about like the white lady with like blonde hair who's like, predicting your fortune. And it's like this funny
Mm-hmm.
thing on TV.
Yeah.
And it really is this ancient tool that we can be using. So I think using astrology, using automations, using AI, using technology responsibly, getting to know your neighbors, banding together, and realizing where you do share some of the same values and the same goals, and how can you help one another do that, and being good, responsible people when it comes to like cleanliness. How much are you throwing away, and how are you throwing it away? And um, are we supporting companies that don't care about dumping toxic shit in the rivers that are killing and hurting our ecosystems and polluting our water? That's going to be a big one over the next
Mm-hmm.
couple of years.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks so much. Thank you so
You're
much for it.
welcome. I don't like it to get dark. I don't like to think about the darkness of like the next few years. I always like to think like, what can we do, and what should we be focusing on? And
Yeah.
so don't live in fear. There's a lot of like fear mongering, especially on TikTok, about Oh, like Pluto and Aquarius. It's like, yeah, there was a lot of fear mongering around the last few years too, and we got through it, even though it was
Mm-hmm.
really crazy at times, but we got through it. And we have a resiliency now
Mm-hmm.
that none of us ever thought we would have.
Yeah. And I feel more and more people will understand their mission in their life,
Mhm.
and they will start doing it. So probably this is how we will come together and take some
Yeah,
of the issues. Yeah.
totally. That was one of the most beautiful things about 2020. So many people did set down the facades and like the boxes they were trying to fit into and chose who they really wanted to be and who they really were. And, if all the terrible things of 2020 had to happen for that, maybe in some way it was worth it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm one of them. I didn't have a clue what to do with my life before 2020, and then I was working from home when the pandemic started, and I had so much time, and I decided to invest in self-development courses that then became spiritual growth courses. And I was already meditating and doing Reiki, and this is
Yeah.
how I discovered myself and who I was and what I came here to do. Took me a while to admit it to myself. Astrology helped to confirm what I was thinking, together with Akashic record readings and many other things that I did. I did everything I could during those years. And yeah, and
Yeah.
now I'm doing it.
I love that. All
Yeah.
the healers coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. Your wisdom is really an honor to have you here. And
Thank you.
I don't know if there is anything else you want to add. Otherwise, you can share with us where people can find you, how they can book an astrology reading with you, and all these good things. And I will put them on the show note too.
Yeah. The last thing that came to mind that I just wanted to toss in here is like the other piece of Saturn and Pisces is to really work on developing and getting to know your gifts because, like we talked about earlier, they're not celebrated in society and they're like muscles that when you consciously work on bringing them forward, it gets stronger. And just because you can't like see or hear or talk to ghosts doesn't mean you have gifts. I didn't think I have gifts for a really long time, but it turns out, tasting colors and seeing smells it is a gift in its own way because it helps me understand things and provides that sixth sense. But everyone has their own version of a sixth sense. So
Mm-hmm.
get creative, test your intuition, and like develop those gifts. And that's something I'd love to help people strategize and figure out like what is your gift and like how do you bring it forward. And I do that in my one-on-one readings and when I work with people more long term. And I just finished a rebrand on my website and I have all of my information there and all the different ways to work with me. And it's kjatlas.com. And for now, I take one-on-one readings and I have some greater containers coming and building out to work with me long term to get more of those big transformations and big results. So you can always find me on Instagram and send me a message and tell me where you're at and we can figure out a plan of like what's the best thing to get you to that next level of where you want to be. But if you've never had a chart reading, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot recommend KJ enough. So please book your session if you're
Oh,
curious. Okay.
thank
Thanks
you.
so much for
It's such
being
a pleasure to
here.
be here. Thank you.
And okay. Thanks, everyone. And see you in the next episode. Bye.